Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin and Familia. It's that week between the conference championship and the Super Bowl. We're kind of live. We pre-recorded this, but we're releasing this live on a live stream. So Familia, make sure you're going to YouTube, giving us a like and subscribe, por favor. I wanted to make sure we got a little content before we start doing all the blowout stuff for the Super Bowl. But right now, it's time to look ahead a little bit. Look ahead. But first off, before we look ahead, I just want to make sure you're going to fantasypoints.com, get your 30% off the subscription for 2020 for the 2023 season. It's going to take you all the way through the Super Bowl 2024. So you got all, just so much great content, that's going to help you win your leagues. And our invitado de lujo. He's someone who has been helping people win their leagues all over the time. And when I say that, Familia, when I went to Canton, Ohio, first time in Ohio last year, and there were people that I walked up to. Before I said hello, I hugged them, and this is our invitado de lujo. This is one of those people. I mean, Familia, I just tell you, I love to have seen his ride over these last 3 years since he started creating fantasy football content, starting this adventure. He's mushroomed to being the lead caballo over on Dynasty over at FootballGuys. He's 1/3 of what used to be the Debbie Royale, and now they were so good that FootballGuys said, "Hey, we need you guys to be our FootballGuys college football show." So those guys really break down the college game as well as anyone. So Familia, and that's why I'm really glad he's here. Familia, he's a girl dad, he's a Buckeye, he's the consigliere for Bills Mafia, but you guys all know him as at For Whom J Bell Tolls, mi buen amigo, el jefe, as I like to call him, Jeff Bell. Welcome, Jeff, jefe.
Jorge, that was the best introduction I've ever had in my entire life, and thank you so much for that. And I am just absolutely thrilled that I am able to be here and share this time with you, and so grateful that you reached out and had me on. I echo those feelings. I was so excited when I got to meet you and run into you in Canton, and I hope we get to do it again. And just thank you so much for that opportunity, for this opportunity, and I'm ready to talk. Let's go.
I love it. And you know what? I'm so glad you're here because, this is kind of like that time where, we start to really look at what's coming up. And you have been really from August, before August, because you guys are looking at doing preview stuff, but, September, October, when you're grinding the college football season, now the Super Bowl is coming up. We're about to dive headfirst in the NFL draft season. And this is kind of like, part of your baby. This is something that I remember last year when we did this show, it was so good that I had to chop it up into 3 pieces. So this time, and we're going to do one of the position groups, but you're going to help our Familia get caught up, those people who've just been grinding the NFL season. So now we're coming off the college bowl games there, and we're going to have like the Senior Bowl and some of the college all-star games. Kind of what are some of your overall impressions of this upcoming draft? Where is it deep? Where is it kind of shallow?
It's nice because we've got some quarterbacks. I think after last year not having quarterbacks, that's been, I think we're thankful that we've got some guys to be excited about at the top of the class. And I think it goes as deep as 4 at the top of the class between CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, and then Anthony Richardson. You go into having Bijan Robinson, having that crown jewel that you've been waiting for a couple of years at the tippy top of your rookie drafts, and likely first round running back again. And that's always nice to add in, and then depth throughout the wide receiver class. I think last year, especially the year before, you felt a lot better about the wide receivers coming in. That is probably a weak area of this class, but there are still players that are going to make an impact. We know the importance of that position in the NFL and the increasing value that teams are putting on it. So you're going to get some guys that are going to go in the first round, and whether or not how high they go will be a question going in. But you look at the depth, and again, a couple quarterbacks, running back that you really like, another running back, Jahmyr Gibbs, right there too. And then when you get to the actual draft, I think you're going to get a feed of a lot of those defensive linemen, those edge rushers that you like to see as well.
I know we're going to talk about wide receivers, but Bijan Robinson is the guy that so many people are talking about. He's almost the consensus 101 in rookie drafts coming up. Where I think in the last 5-6 years, the best running back to come out is Saquon. Kind of putting on your running back scout hat. How do you compare the two coming out at that time at their respective times?
Saquon was more of a home run threat than I think you're going to get with Bijan Robinson. The player that my favorite comp I saw somebody throw out about Bijan Robinson is Edgerrin James is kind of, so he's not going to be, I think that people might be a little bit disappointed maybe if he runs the 40 at the combine. I'm not sure if he will or not. He's more of that, hit you with paper cuts and able to work out of the passing game versus being the Saquon guy that's going to hit a home run off one play. But again, he's very good, very, very productive. And he's a true 3-down back, and he'll profile. He's my dynasty running back 1 right now, just because of the dynasty running back landscape and the hype that is around him, the value that's assigned to him. My ranks are kind of more market value ranks versus like production ranks. And so I think that when you look at market value, he's the most valued running back asset in dynasty football right now.
Yeah. I just hope that he ends up somewhere where he can end up with a workload like Dameon Pierce did last year, where it was just clear that he was going to be the guy from the start. From a rookie standpoint, I guess Breece Hall kind of came into that role eventually. Ken Walker, it took an injury for him to get there, but yeah, I want to see it. I'd hate to see him come into a timeshare. That's the thing. I'm just saying, I'm lighting a veladora for that he ends up being the main guy.
Well, I think the capital that's going to take to acquire him is going to force him into that situation. The devaluation of the running back position. I mean, you go back, and Derrick Henry was an absolute stud coming out, and then the Titans kind of shifted him into a timeshare with DeMarco Murray early in his career, and that was frustrating. And then even they used Dion Lewis as a timeshare as well for a little bit too for him. But I think we're at the point now where teams aren't concerned about stacking up elite running backs like maybe at one point in time. My mind flashes way back, and I feel like Chester Taylor and Adrian Peterson are kind of like there, where it was like Chester Taylor was like this productive back, like still hanging around with Adrian Peterson. I might be misremembering and overlapping two guys, but I do know, like in the past, yeah, we've had those elite guys that have run into timeshare situations. I just think that it's going to take a first round draft pick to acquire him, and a team's not going to mess around with that.
I think you're right. They're not going to do that. And it'll end up being like what you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor. When he came in, Marlon Mack was the guy, and the previous year, 1,000-yard rusher, and it became very clear who's the guy. And like you said, Adrian Peterson. By the way, I love the Edgerrin James comp. One of my favorite running backs. I still remember that draft. It was him and Fred Taylor came out in that same draft, and I still remember one of my leagues. Guy took both guys at the end of the first round and just rolled the league, and so they were fantastic. But so okay, enough about nostalgia. I mean, we're talking wide receiver. We're going to talk wide receivers, and you mentioned how it's becoming such a more important position for the NFL and for fantasy, especially on the dynasty side. People are talking about Justin Jefferson as possible 101 next season in redraft. And you mentioned dynasty because you get that longevity. I think the great thing is, like, things have started to build, in 2019 when AJ Brown and DK Metcalf both broke out. And then now we're seeing the proliferation of wide receivers going in the first round and contributing right away. How important has this position become?
So I just wrote an article that was released last week for Football Guys, and what I did was I essentially looked back at the 2022 fantasy football season, and I said, what would be the perfect team you could have drafted if you were to look at ADP in August? If you were to go like groups of 12, like what would have been the perfect squad that you can build that would have won you a title in almost any circumstance? And one of the key pieces were the rookie wide receivers. that you were able to get later. You're able to get these guys. Garrett Wilson was around like the 11th round or so. Chris Olave was in similar territory. Those guys made that team. Those guys had very good production and were very good values on that. You rewind even further back, Ja'Marr Chase breaking out and being that, I think he was a top 5 wide receiver his rookie season. And that was a guy that he was carrying a 5th, 6th round ADP, especially when those crazy stories about the drops in training camp came out and his ADP dipped a little bit there. And he was just a leak breaker there. And then the year before, you had Justin Jefferson come straight in, and he was a guy that he was a very, very late pick. And there, again, he also had stories about Olabisi Johnson is running ahead of Justin Jefferson in camp, and he just broke out immediately. And you see these values on these receivers, and what you're getting now is, we're old enough, Jorge, that when we played in junior high football, the coaches did not think you could throw the ball, and then we just ran the ball nonstop, and that's just how it was. And a lot of high school programs were the same way. They just ran the ball. Now they're running spread offenses in 4th grade. These wide receivers are coming in so refined because they worked on those skills throughout junior high, throughout high school, in spread formation, and throughout college, and that old wing T is gone. And so they're working on professional level passing concepts as they're working through high school. And so you're getting polished receivers that are able to come in and make an impact. And there's a lot of uncertainty around those guys. And that leads to devaluation of those assets when you're sitting there especially in your redraft leagues. I think there's still a mindset that people think that rookies need time to develop before they're able to contribute in fantasy. They don't, and they are a real cheat code right now if you're able to grab those guys later in drafts, and that's who you should be targeting. Once you get past those elite receivers, probably let it sit for a minute and then grab those rookies that are a little bit later.
I think you're right. Yeah, some of the best teams that I had this year, I piled on the rookies from round 8 on. And I think the big lesson that I'm going to tell people is draft rookies, and just unless you absolutely do not drop them unless you absolutely have to. I mean, yes, you're going to have a Sky Moore in there who is going to be worthy of getting dropped, but Jahan Dotson helped people win leagues at the end, and just so many guys. And then we go back to Amon-Ra St. Brown in 2021. So, and I dropped him after week 1 in that year, and I wish that I almost picked them up right before you started that run, and somebody beat me to him on waivers, but that's all right. That's all right. Lesson learned. And speaking of lessons learned, just before we dive into it, quick look back. What were some of the greatest hits from a player perspective, and maybe kind of a miss here and there that kind of has you still kicking some rocks?
So a miss, Kyle Pitts. I was all over Kyle Pitts. I wrote an article about him. We do a spotlight series at FootballGuys in the summer. We look at players that we think we are high on relative to consensus. Kyle Pitts was an automatic pick for me, usually in the 3rd round or the 2nd round, whatever it might be. If I had a later 2nd round pick, 3rd round pick, grabbing him every single time as that, thinking he's a cheat code at that tight end, and he was just nothing. And that one really hurt. When it comes to hits, so another article that I wrote, 2 different articles. One was on looking at receivers on new teams, and how when these receivers are traded on a new teams, how that used to be a narrative that a receiver on a new team would be a disappointment. But when teams are trading for these receivers, the production spikes often in many circumstances. So I was grabbing AJ Brown everywhere that I could in redraft. I was grabbing Tyreek Hill everywhere that I could. And, we've played in league together. That I have AJ Browns and Tyreek Hills on my team. I was grabbing those guys and getting those guys. And then I wrote another article right before the season started, and I looked at receivers that, like, what was the profile of a receiver 1 that was outside of the top 20 receivers picked. And it really broke down into 3 different categories of what you're looking for. You're looking for rookies was one category, and I had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave on a lot of teams. You're looking for players who had done it before, but we invented some reason to fade them. And Amon-Ra St. Brown fit into that category, and I had Amon-Ra St. Brown on a bunch of teams, and that was a very nice hit. And then you're looking for players that a couple years back had done it. It's similar profiles, but injuries, whatever it might be. And DK Metcalf was another player that I had a lot of. And DK Metcalf had a discounted ADP, and he rewarded pretty well, having that previous track record. And that's really what you're looking for, players that had done it before, that have discounted ADPs or those rookie breakouts.
No, that's awesome. I think you're right. DK Metcalf was a big miss for me, so I'm with you on that. Just because I thought, oh, Geno Smith's never going to be able to get the ball to him, but no, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Talent wins out so many times, and that's the beautiful part. And I think that's the thing that keeps us excited about this game, is just that, being able to look at that. It's like, okay, we never get it just right. And that's why we play in so many leagues. And it's like, we still, no matter how much our best teams, you're still going to look at a draft pick here and there and be like, what I could have done there. But, oh man. And that's awesome. And, any kind of, from lesson learned, what draft strategy kind of like, are you kind of looking at, either dynasty or redraft?
Well, I do want to make one quick point. I think you mentioned that we're going to be wrong. And I think that's something to consider. And Adam Harstead at FootballGuys is a very, very smart individual, one of the most smartest in the fantasy space. And he's mentioned in the past, but looking at it, you allow yourself to be wrong, but turn out right. And by that, I mean, like, you look at Josh Jacobs last year, where we were wrong on his value, but the right outcome on him gave you so much more value, versus like you've got other players that you could be wrong, and if it doesn't work out the right way, then they're just a nothing. And so I think that's one thing that I always try to look at, and I really honed in on looking at this, what happened last year and moving forward. Look at players that have that ceiling, that the potential to be wrong in the right direction, that is the beneficial direction, versus be wrong in the direction that you've just got a dead asset. But when it comes to building teams, I'm a big zero running back advocate. I really like zero running back build. I like to hammer those elite quarterbacks. It's something we talked about pre-show. Getting an elite quarterback, I think, is a big difference maker in fantasy football right now. And getting those wide receivers that give you that weekly production that you can pile in there, those elite wide receivers, building the teams around that, and then being able to find either a hero running back approach, one running back that you feel comfortable starting weekly and kind of stream that second position, or go all in and stream both those running back positions. But that's how I really like to build my teams. And that's how I've found that you have the most upside potential within teams.
Oh man, well, you're speaking my language. I'm still on the hero side, but I did veer into zero time, and a couple of my best teams from last year were zero builds, so I'm getting more comfortable with it. So you were one of the inspirations for it.
I appreciate that. It's scary. It's scary when you're sitting there. It's not you don't want to share those screenshots on Twitter in August because people are going to roast you, but you're sitting there in November and you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, when you got Josh Jacobs in the 7th round and he's your first running back, and then all of a sudden it's like, people are like, oh yeah, well, who's laughing now? Who's laughing now? Well, maybe let's jump into those wide receivers. And you and Kevin and Christian have already done a lot of stuff. You guys have done mock drafts and everything, and that to me is a great thing. I think in one of your in your most recent mock draft, you guys had 5 wide receivers going in the first round. So I kind of I bunched those guys at the front end of this. So I'm gonna list them out, everybody. I'm gonna put put the names of the players and their height and weight. But I want to start with a guy in my backyard. I think I've told you before, I'm a UCLA guy. So we're in the you're on the Ohio State Michigan side. That's our Ohio State Michigan side. But Jordan Addison on USC, I remember you were really talking about him last year, how he made Kenny Pickett so much, he saved Kenny Pickett so many times. I really saw the talent this year. I mean, just I think the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause, he looks kind of skinny, but I mean, Devonta Smith kind of blew that out. I mean, I think Kevin pointed out in a recent article, he's going to have a BMI of about 23.7, which people don't love anything under 25. what do you like about Jordan Addison? Any concerns?
Refined ability. I think he's a very polished receiver. I think Devonta Smith is the natural comparison when you were looking at him, and I think that that's probably a fair place to go. He's got the explosion, the ability to work routes, explosive routes, ability to explode after the catch. I think there might be some questions on top end speed, and there certainly is some questions on play strength. But when you look at the NFL today, it's not the NFL that we grew up watching, where you're going to have these big corners that are going to chuck you at the line and you're not able to get off. It's the teams have been able to scheme up ways that receivers can get off, and wide receivers with the quickness can do it anyways, because these corners can't grab them at the line like they used to be able to do. Ty Law back in the day, grabbing those Indianapolis receivers at the line. And so the concerns on him, I think, are those, but I'm a little bit less leery on those concerns, just because that explosive upside of the potential is the ability to work inside, the ability to work outside, the ability to serve as, I don't know if he's a true number one receiver at the NFL level, but at the same time, I feel like people would have said the same thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he's looking now like he's a true wide receiver one at the NFL level because of the way that the league has shifted in that direction to allow those types of players that can operate in the slot while also hitting you deep. And I think that Jordan Addison checks all those boxes.
Would he be, where would he rank on your personal list?
He is my wide receiver 3 right now. So
Okay.
I've got Jaxon Smith-Njigba is my wide receiver 1 right now, and Quentin Johnston is my wide receiver 2 when it comes to fantasy production. It's and this is one of those that if Jordan Addison is connected to Justin Herbert, I'm going to feel pretty great. Or if he's connected to the New York Giants and whatever that situation is, I'm going to feel less great. And so I think that landing spot can flip these top 3 right now. They're very, very close. It's just really gambling on archetypes and gambling on, how comfortable do you feel like these wide receivers can profile into elite production.
Oh man, you got me fantasizing about Justin Herbert with him and with an offensive coordinator who likes to actually throw the ball deep. Oh, this would just be, because they took so many deep shots with him with Caleb Williams, who's just a marvelous talent. I love that idea. You got me excited now. Now I want him on the Chargers more, even though I saw somebody recently comp Bijan Robinson. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order on what we were going to do. I want to go Jaxon Smith-Njigba next because in a lot of ways he's my favorite player in this, because I can't get out of my mind that Rose Bowl game last year where he was just clearly the best player on the field, and it wasn't even close for number 2. 347 yards, just catching balls, catching deep balls. He even had a touchdown, lost a touchdown where he fumbled at the goal line, but he won that game for the Buckeyes. Why is he your number 1 guy?
When you look at the way that NFL offensive has advanced, and I think that the ability to win in the quick game, the ability to win out of the slot, the ability to work after the catch, I think he checks all those boxes, and those are the guys that are eating a lot of volume when it comes to fantasy football. And ultimately, at the end of the day, fantasy football is a volume game, and so I think that he's the type of player that and I think that there are concerns that are fair on him about his ability to win outside. At the same time, I don't know that I care, because I think that he's going to be a dominant slot receiver. He's going to be a dominant inside receiver that's going to have a schemed up plays going to him. He's going to have run after the catch opportunities. He's going to just get a whole bunch of volume. And that's what he did at Ohio State. That's where he really excelled at Ohio State. And Ohio State, a lot of the concepts that they run are, Ryan Day was an NFL coach. And so there are NFL levels in their passing concepts. And I think that I can profile him into that, like that Amon-Ra St. Brown role, or like my comp for him is Brandon Ayuk and these players that can operate in the quick and intermediate game. And ultimately, that's, the NFL is less about those Andre Johnsons from however long ago and more about those guys now that can work in that quick game, because I think that there's certain levels of replaceability maybe in that types of scheme. And that's what you're looking for. You don't want a receiver that if he's out, your offense is dead. You want a player that you build those offense and give those quarterback those easy throws and that get it out of his hand and allow the receiver to create after the catch.
Yeah, and you're speaking my language when when you're talking about Brandon Ayuk and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think I love that. I mean, there's an effortlessness in the way he moves, especially watching that game. I mean, and to me, the one thing that really strikes me, two guys, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, both pointed at him and was like, "Oh, he was the dude on our team," and those guys are dudes. Those guys are already, I think they're both number one receivers on their teams and on their respective teams. So I think it's when those guys are saying that, and they definitely took a clear step backward for him. I mean, I know they were not in the Rose Bowl. No, I think he may be. I know I put Addison first, but I think JSN, if he and the health factor is a question. What have you been hearing about his hammy?
I'm not overly concerned about it, to be honest with you. I think that what happened, I'm trying not to put my bitter Buckeye fan hat on here. I think that I'm not sure if he shut down because of the injury or shut down because he was thinking the NFL. I don't know. It depends what you hear one way or the other. He heard it right away, week 1 against Notre Dame. He tried to come back about 3 or 4 weeks later. He heard it again. And I don't know. We've seen in the past college players that know that they're going to the NFL. They have that injury. And we saw Nick Bosa with Ohio State where he pulled out and there was talk that he might be able to make it back from the Michigan game or the bowl game. And then he ultimately didn't. There was some rumors around the program that Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and he kind of alluded to it on Twitter right before they got announced as a playoff spot that he would be able to be back. And then ultimately, like the day that they were announced that he's going to the playoffs, he said, "No, I'm going to the NFL. I'm not going to play." So I think that there's questions on the level of severity of injury versus looking forward and the ability to earn an NFL paycheck. I think that is out there. I don't know where to go with that. But a hamstring affecting a player a year after a hamstring injury happens, I'm just skeptical that would really be an issue moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also one of those things. I mean, I respect a guy who wants to protect his future, and I look at him as, respecting the future, taking care of that, and also maybe it does take a while. It can take a while to kind of ramp back up to being for big time college football games. So maybe there was some trepidation about being ready. So I don't want to end that one on a positive note. I think he's he's a wonderful player. Don't think not quite Jamar Chase, but I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a fun player to get. One guy that I'd love to get your thoughts on him, Quentin Johnston. I mean, just has incredible acceleration. I saw one play where it looked like he accelerated to top speed at 3 different points. He has great movement. He has that spin move that he loves to do on people. 6'4", 194 pounds, big guy. Just an incredible catch radius. He looks can look like a pterodactyl at some point. A couple of things that I didn't love. I felt like he was a body catcher in what I saw. I didn't love that, but one of the things we've seen guys who are raw, like Christian Watson last year for a spell. Could we see something out of him next year in his rookie season?
Oh, definitely. He's got the explosive athletic ability to be there. He's got that size that really you can't teach. You got a 6'4" guy that might be one of the fastest wide receivers in the class. That's certainly going to raise eyebrows. And it's interesting. The Christian Watson is not somewhere that I kind of took my mind originally, because a lot of what Watson did in college was a lot more schemed work, involvement in the run game type thing, whereas Johnston attacked more downfield. And so that's an interesting place, because that's where we saw Watson have a lot of success when he got to the NFL level. It's the things that you mentioned, the body catching, I think that there are some questions about his hands, maybe the technical refinement when it comes to him. Disappearance, I think, is a fair point, because there was areas of the field, areas of the season that you just didn't notice him. And whereas you feel like he should have been the primary, and he was in many ways the primary playmaker for TCU. At the same time, he just appeared at some points. I don't know that Max Duggan did him a lot of favors in that regard. Max Duggan is a fun college quarterback with a lot of heart, but I think that there were probably opportunities that were left on the field for Johnston when it comes down to Duggan's real ability to distribute the ball to him. Is probably a little bit of it as well. But he's really going to be that traditional big receiver that NFL teams love, and I think he's going to be the first wide receiver selected in the draft. I don't know that he's the best choice for fantasy in the draft.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a polarizing guy. I feel like he's going to be a little polarizing, like Treylon Burks. You mentioned disappearing, and I remember watching the national championship game and being like, at certain points, is like, is this guy even in the game? And he wasn't. I mean, Georgia just overwhelmed them. So I don't think, like you mentioned, Duggan didn't do him any favors, and that was probably it. He didn't have time to throw and couldn't find him. But man, I know I mentioned Christian Watson. I just kind of feel like we're going to hear some of the same things about him that we heard about Treylon Burks, that very raw. And but I keep kind of feeling like when I wrote down his numbers that he had 903 yards this season, I was like, wow, shouldn't have he had more for a team that was unbeaten or that only lost one game and played in the national championship. So we'll see. I mean, Christian Watson definitely helped some teams for a few weeks there. So I want to get into going to Carolina on my mind. Josh Downs, he's 5'10", 180. Slot, a lot of people talking about a slot receiver. Could he be more, or is he kind of like that classic Deontay Johnson type?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a minute. I apologize for that. Yeah. Josh Downs is a player that I think that's that prototype where he can work out of the slot. He can also attack vertically. I think that there's levels of explosion in Josh Downs' game that you like to see, that he can attack downfield outside of just being that slot receiver. And I think he's a player that the exciting thing about him is as you look at receivers, there's that fine line between are they going to be a late first round pick, and are they going to land an elite offense, or are they going to be an early second round pick and you're a little bit more nervous about the situation that they fall into? And I feel like that's, as much as you want to see first round draft capital on a receiver and feel good about it, you're running that razor's edge between is he going to land in Buffalo or Kansas City and play with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, or is he going to end up as the top of that second round? And he's the guy that I think out of anybody in this class is right on that edge. And I think that's going to be the thing to watch there. But he's got the athleticism that you like to see. He was a primary receiver for Drake May at North Carolina, and you like to see that. Again, there's a lot of guys in this class that size is kind of a conversation about it. But again, like we mentioned with Jordan Addison, a lot of the NFL has regulated out a lot of that size just because of the physicality and the allowance to putting your hands on receivers early.
And one guy, and again, I'm not trying to shine your Buckeye apple. He kind of reminded me a little bit of Olave, just kind of very smooth. And it almost,
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it almost felt like he had quiet feet, and it was just like before you knew it, he was gone, and no one was catching him. So I love that kind of a couple of jump balls that I like to see on some of the film that I watch. So I think I loved what you said about it's definitely going to impact him if he ends up being drafted by the Chiefs and all of a sudden it's just like, wow. And then we're really excited about him at that point. So love that. So I want to ask you about one of the more, I don't know about controversial, but it's some guy, you guys spent a little time on this on a recent episode of the Football Guys college football show, is Kayshon Boutte. Did I say that right?
You did. Yes,
I did. Okay. There's questions for what he was asked. I mean, he was asked not to come back. So, we don't know exactly what's the truth. I think one of you guys mentioned it might have been academic oriented or something like that, but he's no longer there. The skills appear to be there though. And I mean, I know there was some injuries involved. I mean, what if this guy hits, what is the team going to get?
If this guy hits, a team is going to get a primary alpha receiver that you build an offense around and is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Bottom line, the problem is that he did that immediately as a freshman, and then you had kind of 2 up and down injury plagued production lower seasons as he ended his college career. And so that's where you start, and then you step into the rumor that I heard was that he wasn't academically eligible to that he basically failed out of the fall semester, and so that's why he was not able to play in the bowl game, and that's why he left. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true or not, and I've heard I don't know the other character concerns. I don't know if there's other stories out there. I've heard that there are other stories, but I don't know what those are. It's as you sit here in January or early in the off season and you're looking at it, and especially if you're drafting early in your rookie draft, it's just a gamble, because the upside is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. The downside is that the red flags around him and production concerns around him are enough that this guy is a day 3 pick, and we just don't even know. It's just the biggest enigma probably in this entire class, especially from a fantasy point of view, the biggest swing of outcomes of what you're going to get here. And so that's why it makes it difficult on really putting a valuation on him, where you want to take him.
Yeah, it's I think people who are drafting before doing rookie drafts before the NFL draft, this is going to be the guy that people are spending a lot of extra time before they hit the button on him. And but yeah, I mean, there were character concerns about George Pickens, but he ended up in one of the best environments for a wide receiver, and things were quiet on him. So hopefully, guys, when they see the opportunity, that those character concerns go away. Want to go out to Beantown, Boston College, Zay Flowers, 5'10", 172. Just, a guy that really, I mean, just acceleration, change of direction, yak ability, good hands. Seems to do it all. Had a great season, 78 catches, 1,077 yards, 12 touchdowns for a team that doesn't really, it's not nationally known for passing the ball. Where would you like to see him end up? And what do you see coming out of him?
So I think he's landing in that similar bucket, and really the last 2 guys that we talked about between Josh Downs and Kayshon Boutte, where he's a player that can go at the end of the first round or land somewhere in day 3, or not. He's not going to be day 3. I'm that early round 2 type player.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're looking at 2 different valuations on elite passing offense versus a bad team, I think, is a lot of the question that's going to come down on him. I think you hit it perfectly. I think he's a player that can win out of the slot, and a player that can win outside, win vertically, can win in all areas of the field. And that's really what I like to see when it comes to a prospect. Again, another size guy, and we got a handful of them in this class. I'm less concerned about, again, the size concerns, just because of the explosion that is in his game. I think it's I like him a lot. I think he's going to be a very productive receiver. I was a little bit surprised that he went back to college, and then I was I had a joking tweet, I think it was even today, where I talked about I had questions about his decision making of going back and playing with Boston College instead of just going to Alabama and playing with Bryce Young, because I feel like had I been in those similar shoes where I wanted to increase my value, I would try to hook up with a guy like that. But that is what that is.
Yeah, Jordan Addison didn't talk to him and tell him about the difference between playing in Pittsburgh and Southern California. So a little difference, a little bit of difference. One guy that I'm really curious what your thoughts are on him, Marvin Mims. By the way, related to Denzel, right? Related
I
to
don't
Denzel?
know if he
Yeah,
is or not, to be honest with you.
I looked it up and I got some conflicting stuff and I couldn't really trust the source. So I didn't know if maybe you heard. I mean, well, we'll figure. I'm sure it'll come out. Some big play ability that I saw. I saw a lot of plays where he was like the only guy on the screen when catching the ball. But I mean, some of it. So I there was a part of me that's like, okay, do I need to be skeptical of a Big 12 receiver because sometimes the defenders just they're going to be PE coaches in a few months. What are your thoughts on him?
I think that's fair. That's a fair concern. I think that he was in most, playing for Oklahoma and not, I don't know. He's productive receiver that I don't think has the ceiling as the guys that we've talked about previously. I think he's more of a role player when it really comes down to it. I think boom bust potential is probably a good way to think about Mims. I don't know if I would have him as my seventh receiver in the class, to be honest with you. So he's a good player, but again, it's going to be landing spot dependent probably, and you're going to care. I feel a lot more comfortable projecting draft capital onto the previous guys that we talked about versus Mims. I don't know that I see him in the first round conversation very much, and he might be more of a day 3 type player when it really comes down to it. So at his size, and if he were to land in that situation, that would probably raise some red flags. But the potential is there. It's just I think it's a little bit of a lower ceiling bet.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's gonna be landing spot dependent before I get excited about where he ends up getting picked. The next guy I really want to. I'm very curious your thoughts on him, Jalin Hyatt, out of Tennessee, the Militnikoff Award winner. Had some extraordinary plays. I mean, that 5 touchdown game against Alabama is going to be, he's never going to have to pay for another beer in Knoxville the rest of his life. So hopefully on that, you look at him, there's questions about how he does on scheme, but man, he's so fast. He's so fast. He just ran off the screen sometimes. What's your kind of like scouting report on him at the next level?
You're exactly right. The speed is going to be, I think he's going to be the fastest guy at the combine, and that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows. Production was great in one season and then nothing before that. And so I think that makes you a little bit nervous that this isn't a player that ramped up into that production, that he really kind of came out of nowhere, had one crazy great season, and then he's gone to the NFL. There are a lot of questions about his technical ability. What all is there on? Does he have other moves? Is it just a speed move, or a lot of his plays where guy kind of missed a tackle and he was out the back door and he was just gone? And he's that type of player. I think there's a projectable role for him that he is going to be a vertical field stretcher. So assuming he lands in a good place, you feel good about that. But then it's like, that's probably the bottom end would be a boom bust player that you really like in best ball formats. Top end, he could be one of the most productive fantasy receivers in this class, and you're kind of, there's a lot of gamble involved in that because there are things that you want to see in the next level that you haven't seen quite yet. But he does have good size for his speed. He's a little bit longer arms than maybe what you realize when you think of a typical just kind of vertical speed guy. My comparison for him was Will Fuller, and that was a guy that he was a wide receiver 1 level production for a lot of his career, but he just couldn't stay on the field. And whether or not Hyatt is able to overcome some of those concerns would be a big question. But just really, how refined can he be? How many routes can he run compared to just the straight out pure speed?
No, you're right. And you mentioned the guy who kind of popped in 1 year and then went to the NFL after a couple years and not really doing much. I kind of flashed to Jameson Williams for a second. Obviously not quite the same type of player, but definitely speed to burn on both of them. But I think I like your Will Fuller comp a little bit better. He's a guy I'm very one of the guys I'm by the time we get or closer to the draft, I think I'm going to have him higher up because I just think that speed is he's going to run a 40 that's going to be just electric, and it's going to drive people nuts. And yeah, people are going to go local all over it. So a couple guys. Couple guys at the end that we could run through these guys. Rashee Rice out of SMU, bigger guy, 6'2", 203. What kind of, you look at him, I mean, he has physical skills, but I mean, I think people have talked about, needing to learn route running. Yeah. What, kind of, can he use kind of like the contested catches that he had to get kind of a foothold while he kind of gets his feet under him on the route running side?
So my thoughts on Rashee Rice, I don't know that he's got the real frame of what you're looking for in a traditional X receiver, that traditional big receiver that you kind of lines up on the corner and kind of use him as the boundary. And I don't know that he's refined enough, good enough to be a slot receiver. And so it's kind of, there's like a narrow window there where if you don't feel good about him playing that X, you don't feel good about him being the slot, he could be the primary receiver in the offense, or he could be nothing. And I think that like last year's class, like David Bell was that type of player where like I didn't feel good about him being a speed merchant, didn't feel good about him being that primary big X alpha receiver. I didn't feel good about him being a primary slot, but there's that chance that he could be an elite alpha number one receiver. But if you don't get that, then there's not a lot of safety net there. And I think that Rice kind of reminds me of a similar type player as that. And saw with Bell, he was on the field a lot for the Browns, but he didn't really do a lot for the Browns. And so I think he's more of an outside player than what Bell's more of an inside player. But that is one thought on him. Christian Williams, my co-host, compared him to Michael Gallup, where Michael Gallup is not that. You don't really know that you feel like there's a role for Michael Gallup, but he's still on the field type thing. And he kind of drives you nuts in fantasy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, he's a guy next year, he'll be a full year removed from his ACL tear. So hopefully he's going to take a step forward, because they need that, as we saw in the recent conference in the divisional round. Last guy to talk about, and kind of had an abrupt season, did not, had some injuries. Cedric Tillman, 6'3", 215, obviously bloodlines. Father played in the NFL. Another Tennessee receiver, another big guy that we're talking about, but health is a concern, improving route running. What does he need more between those or anything else to have success?
I worry about level of athleticism with him, to be honest. I think he profiles as that traditional X, and I don't think you're going to be able to move him inside. And the way that offenses are constructed, I think that there's a real ceiling on those types of players, that they kind of land more traditionally into a boom bust type production profile where you're not getting that consistent target volume. You're getting, if he scores a touchdown, he's a good play. If he doesn't, he's not a good play. I'm a little bit more skeptical on him translating to the NFL level. I'm worried about, I don't know if we got, one thing that I look for, especially in later receivers, is can he contribute to special teams, and does that give a path to even making the roster? And I don't see him as a guy that can contribute to special teams, which makes me a little bit more nervous about, is it going to be a complete whiff if you were to use a rookie pick on him? And he's a player that I'm probably not going to draft a lot of, because it seems like there's a lot of buzz around him in the fantasy community that I'm not sure will translate to the NFL. But I certainly could be wrong. It's just one of those guys that, watching the tape, it just didn't pop for me in terms of athleticism. Physicality is certainly there, and you like to see that. But again, it's just not a league that relies heavily on contested catch players. You're relying a lot more heavily on schemed up space players that can create quick separation, and that's just kind of where we are with the NFL game.
Awesome. Well, we went through 10 guys. I know one of the guys that did, was a day 3 pick last year, Romeo Dobbs, ended up becoming a training camp darling. Anyone you're keeping an eye on, kind of like could be this year's Dobbs?
So I'll throw a handful of names at you here real quick. I really like Trey Palmer from Nebraska. Trey Palmer he was on LSU. He was on the team with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase way back when, and he kind of fell behind Kayshon Boutte, and then eventually transferred to Nebraska and really broke out. And I think that's a player that can move through formation, win inside and win outside, and do some creative things with the ball in his hands. Xavier Hutchinson, I think, is a player that's got a good deal of buzz on him. My comparison for Xavier Hutchinson is Jacoby Myers, where he's a kind of that intermediate, that really good, strong route runner. He's not so much as the physical guy, the burner that's going to beat you downfield. He just can, again, kill you with a bunch of paper cuts. I think Nathaniel Dell from Houston is a fun player, that another smaller player, but I think a player that can play the slot, can play outside, win vertically. And then Rakeem Jarrett is a player to keep an eye on as well. I think that there's KJ Osborne is my comparison for Rakeem Jarrett, and I don't know that he's going to be like a wide receiver 1 ever, but I think that he's that maybe that good wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 potentially, that you just kind of really like to have on the fantasy squad, capable of having some big weeks in a pinch.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, amigo. I mean, oh, wow. I mean, just gave Baker's dozen of names. So love it so much to help our Familia community make sure they're getting ready for the rookie drafts and get ready for the NFL draft. So before we get into that, I want to ask one question about the year 2 guys. Is there hope for Sky Moore? Is there hope for Velus Jones? Is there hope for Jalen Tolbert, guys that got taken fairly early?
I don't see very much for Jalen Tolbert or Velus Jones, to be honest with you. It just didn't seem like the teams were overly interested in working them into any sort of role. I think that Tolbert, my understanding with him is there's concerns about his run blocking, and Dallas values that pretty heavily. And so that's kind of why he wasn't able to get on the field. Velus Jones, the age when he was drafted was already a concern. He just didn't really, he had maybe some late production, but how much is on the vine there really in a Chicago passing offense? And I think that they need to add at least one more target. They bring one more target in there, and you've got that new target. You've got Darnell Mooney, you've got Chase Claypool, all bearing on top of Velus Jones. But the Sky Moore is still the one intriguing name out of this group. Attachment to Patrick Mahomes is interesting. You've got, I think, Mecole Hardman is going to be a free agent. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be a free agent. That is the one name that I'm kind of still circling and taking a chance on. Things still kind of working out for him, because I think the talent is there, the attachment to Patrick Mahomes is there, and the natural opportunity opening up because of the attrition through free agency is potentially there.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, amigo, this has been even better than I could have imagined, and I can't believe we did 3 positions last year when we did this. So thank you. So I want to give you the floor. You got this is your season. I know it's your tax season and your day job, but this is your draft season. You got a lot of great stuff coming up. What can people be excited to see from you coming out on footballguys.com?
We have a top secret. We have a top secret project coming on footballguys.com. Kind of keep your eyes peeled for it. We'll start to hype it up here in about a week or so, but we've got a behind the scenes something big that we're waiting to debut, and I'm not going to spoil it in this stage of this moment, but that's funny. You get dynasty content throughout the year. You got our dynasty rankings up right now, and some other things that we're working on, trying to really build out that dynasty format. We want our name there. We want to be the leader in dynasty, and often I think that the Football Guys name is kind of attached to a redraft and doesn't get mentioned in dynasty. So if you got dynasty needs, please check out Football Guys, and we will continue to build those, and please offer me feedback as well, and I would love to build that out more. But most importantly, follow Jorge and follow all the work that Jorge's doing, and Jorge is awesome, and I'm just so thankful for this stage and this opportunity. Check out all the work that Jorge's doing, because God knows I already got too many Twitter followers, but Jorge needs to grow his platform, and we got to do that and help him out there, because this guy is one of the true, most genuine, kindest, nicest people in the fantasy space, and he makes fantastic content as well. So if you're already watching the show, you know about him, but at the same time, spread that word and let's grow that stage and that platform for Jorge.
Oh, mi amigo, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, that means so much, and I can't wait to see the secret. I'm gonna have it be inspired by Animal House, the double secret probation project. So we'll call it that. It'll be a toga or something on it.
That's right.
Oh man, mi amigo, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Make sure you're following everybody. If you're following me, you're following Jeff, but I want to make sure at For Whom J Bell Tolls, still one of my favorite Twitter handles out there. Familia, one of the truly great people. Also want to make sure you're giving us a follow on YouTube. Give us a like and subscribe. If you want to put a thumbs up, give us a little comment. That'd be great. Also, shout out amigos at fantasypoints.com. Get that, right now, no promo code, but if you're watching this a little bit later, look at my Twitter handle. I'll put the promo code out there for you if it's after the Super Bowl. But yeah, go to fantasypoints.com. Again, I'm at Jorge Martin 17. All my content goes out that way. Familia FFB on Facebook, Instagram. And also, lastly, thank you to Anchor for putting our independent podcast out there on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcasts. So again, to our invitado de lujo, Jefe, muchas gracias for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Muchas gracias. And remember, todos somos familia. Salud.